Welcome back to Workforce Navigator, the podcast where we dig into the strategies, trends, and real insights shaping the future of work and talent. I'm your host, Rodrigo Alcaine, also CEO of Eastridge Workforce Solutions. And if you're joining us for the first time, we're really glad that you're here. And for our returning listeners, thank you, as always, for being part of this community. So we are in season 2, and today's conversation is one I've really been looking forward to. So we're talking global talent acquisition, the shift from transactional recruiting to true talent advisory. What podcasts would be relevant without some discussion around AI, employer branding, and what it actually takes to build a world-class hiring function inside a large, complex organization. My guest today has spent his career at the intersection of strategy and execution in HR and talent. He's led large, globally distributed talent acquisition teams across Fortune 500 organizations, from established industry giants to high-growth disruptors. He's the kind of HR leader who doesn't just support the business, he's certainly helping shape it. He currently serves as the head of global talent acquisition at Ingredion, a global ingredient solution company operating across more than 120 countries, where he's leading the change on modernizing how they attract, engage, and hire top talent around the world. And please welcome to Workforce Navigator, Aaron Hunerkopf. Aaron, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
You did. Pretty close, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I meant to ask right before we kicked off, and I completely forgot. They'll edit this out, hopefully. But I was really nervous about it, so I apologize if I got it wrong.
All good. All
right, Aaron, really glad to have you on. Before we jump into the big topics, give our listeners just a quick snapshot of your path. How did you get to where you are today, leading global talent acquisition at a company like Ingredion?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Rodrigo, thank you for inviting me onto the show. I've been very excited about this session with you. Everything you just talked about are areas of passion for me. I've been in the TA space for about 15 years. And, in that 15 years, we've seen so much transformation in how we do things and what's important to employers and candidates, the tools and technology that are available. So all exciting things. And I've really seen our space become one of the most important parts of not only the HR function, but how companies are successful. So to take a step back a little bit and share a little bit about my background, I started off my career in operations. I graduated in the recession back in 2008, 2009. Tough landscape. I had a bachelor's in marketing, but I didn't have an MBA. At the time, it was almost impossible to even get an interview in marketing. So I started expanding what I was looking for, and it was, I ultimately landed with a small company that was looking to grow towards the East Coast. So they were a California-based auto glass wholesaler. What they did is they sold auto glass and different parts to companies that would compete with like a Safe Light. They had four operations on the West Coast. They had just opened one up in Detroit, and they wanted to open one up in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm from Ohio. So I was brought on board basically as a general manager, had an empty warehouse, and they said, build the business. It was a really good learning opportunity. Seeing something from the ground up, hiring people, stocking, building inventory based on the market and what kind of cars were bought and where replacement auto glass was placed, but learned a lot. Ultimately, though, I wanted to grow. It was a family company. Everybody in leadership was part of the family. It was all the siblings. And I started to look for new opportunities. And a friend of mine had worked at a staffing company. And he said, hey, you really like talking to people. You would come into this role and you'd make about the same amount of money, plus you could make commission. And at the time, I have student loans piling up. I'm like, what? That sounds interesting. Yeah. So I went through the interview process, and the more that I learned, I was like, what? This actually sounds like a lot of fun. I could be helping people chart their careers and helping them find places that they can spend, they can spend their careers growing, learning, and contributing. And made the move and was in staffing for a couple years. Found a passion in it, and through those connections ended up realizing I really liked seeing people flourish once I helped them get on board. And I started getting really close to some of the companies that I supported. One of those companies was a large CPG company called Nestle. And through this relationship, had learned that they were actually trying to build out their internal recruiting function. And they had asked me to come over and join them. And for me at the time, it was a no-brainer. I'm like, wow, now I can do what I love doing, but also see firsthand inside, like what happens once somebody comes on board? What does success look like? How do we improve the quality of hire? All of those things that I just wanted to get more insight into. That was a great experience to learn how things are done within an organization. A company of that size and scale, you saw best practices across the board in all kinds of ways, resources that were just rich, an employee value proposition and culture that people really were attracted to, and a company that had enough scale to where I saw challenges and opportunities that you just don't get everywhere. So a lot of exposure, a lot of learning, and ultimately that had moved me from Ohio to California to help with a major headquarters move. And at that time, really enjoyed my time in Southern California. So when they said, okay, well, your job's going to move back to the East Coast, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to stay in Southern California. And I actually landed in a medical device company. And that was my first global recruitment role, and led global recruitment for a small biotech company. Cut my teeth in, really creating strategy, designing an operating model that could scale across regions, and really learned what it meant to actually elevate capabilities of a team. So really good learnings. Was there for about a handful of years, and then that actually led me to where I am today, which is Ingredion, and you laid that out very well. And I've been here for the past 4 years, leading global talent acquisition. Came into a situation where we were looking to really transform how the function looked and operated, build the credibility, and really deliver differentiated results. And I've been there ever since, and love the path that I've been on.
That's awesome. I love the story, Aaron. I mean, just the trajectory that you have, and not only first fundamentally understanding business operations, because I'm sure that's probably helped you so much in each other step in your career, but then even on the agency side from a talent perspective is, understanding what a lot of different organizations are looking for in the search and quest to find top talent, to all the other experience that you've gained to land where you are. So, and selfishly, you and I cut our teeth in the same staffing company growing up, so that's pretty cool. But you mentioned, early on how much this space has evolved over the last 15 years, and I have to imagine that even if you compress that over the last 5 years and how much that has grown in that time frame, what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing in how companies attract and hire talent today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and what makes it. And you're right. I mean, the past 5 years, especially in our world, has been incredibly dynamic, right? I mean, we've had to, really kind of break the systems that have worked before. Rethink how we attract talent, the systems that we have, what we offer candidates and employees as they come into an organization. It's all shifted, right? And we've had to relearn again. I mean, it's been the past 5 years have been, to me, a flow of constant iteration and growth. And to add complexity, in the past 12 to 18 months, we've also seen a very different labor market, right? In the past 5 years, we've seen what was almost a standstill labor market for a year, all of a sudden turn into, arguably, in our time, the most rapid pace of hiring and mobility across organizations that we may ever see. Now we're into and in the past 12 to 18 months, we've now shifted back into a low hire, low fire environment where competition is incredibly high. So it requires a really strategic, data-driven, human-centered approach to recruitment. It's no longer the volume game. It's no longer the let's highlight a few perks and that should do the trick. I mean, we really have to think about the value proposition that we're laying out and creating a good experience. So I guess all to say, there's to me 3 to 4 things that really stick out. And one, kind of coming back to that candidate-driven market, right? The human-centered approach that prioritizes the experience that has this backed in transparency and authenticity are now viewed as, in my opinion, permission to play. And that can be addressed through redefined but genuine employee value propositions that are highlighting the cultural elements, the flexibility, and the benefits that matter to people. You could also address that through engaging, informative, and clear selection processes that create ambassadors, regardless of whether they're hired. And those 2 pieces to me are really important to that first bucket. The second reality that we're in is we're continuing to see the calls to do more with the same or more with less, right? So what that means internally is that we need to adapt our operating models. We need to adapt our approach to how work gets done, and specifically for TA and what that looks like to attract and hire new talent today. That means we need to be identifying and piloting next generation technology that reduces administrative work and frees up TA partners on the value-added actions that are required today, right? Proactive outreach and networking, deeper candidate engagement that's very connected and well communicated. And there's also a call for a higher degree of manager consultation and guidance, right? I mean, everybody's time is becoming more and more of a currency, and we've got to be really impactful and intentional with the time that we have, whether it be with candidates or internal stakeholders. And the third, and I'll say third and fourth piece are somewhat related, but there's also an importance of shifting to an internal first mindset when a talent need is identified. The focus on upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling your key talent to improve retention. But it also means there's going to be a domino after that, most likely, where we need to focus on future state capabilities we don't have today. And when we're searching externally, that requires talent acquisition to consult with leaders on what skills-based hiring means, knowing what those future state skills are and how to assess them so that we're bringing in the right skills and knowledge and behaviors that are going to help us address not only today's challenges, but tomorrow's as well.
Yeah, those are 3 or 4 really excellent points. And you hit on a few things that we're going to continue to touch on later on, especially around employee value proposition. And also, how do you leverage technology and the right technology to get closer to the human element of the role that is, quite frankly, is needed so much today. But before we get there, there's this kind of notion or growing sense that attention span is now a currency in recruiting. What does that mean practically for how TA teams need to operate?
Yeah. So it means a few things, right? And first and foremost, it requires being very intentional with every touch point that we have, right? What is it that someone absolutely needs to know that's going to resonate with them, right? I think everybody, anybody in any function kind of can tend to speak in terms that like people within their function understand really well, right? And that is no different for recruiting. But what that means for us in terms of when we work with candidates, managers, it means that we've got to be really crisp and clear with what am I asking of you or what am I trying to get through? And as an example, maybe sharing, talking in specific recruitment marketing terms to a manager might not necessarily resonate. But if you instead shift the conversation to, all right, what we're going to do when we go out and source and attract talent is A, B, and C, but what I really need from you and what's going to really help us expand, I'm going to send you something that you can share on LinkedIn. And I just want you to go onto your LinkedIn and copy paste the status. If you want to edit it, that's great. But your network is going to significantly expand who we pull into our pool. And that's really what I need of you from a branding standpoint. If somebody engages, reaches out to you on LinkedIn, and respond, you can always connect them to me, but let me know about it, right? And that making it easy for people. So I think being really impactful, intentional, and clear with your communication, what you need, so that it's relatable, is the number one piece, right? And that goes from everything from how you spend time in that kickoff meeting and what you're asking about, the time that you use, all the way to even the email communications you send, making sure that the things that you want a decision on are the first things that you're communicating, right? You can add some of the context below, but making sure that you're focusing the time and attention where it is needed the most.
Yeah. Yeah. What I loved what you said there is the intentionality that you have to take. And it sounds to me that in this manner, you all are now more a proactive partner in the quest of hiring and attracting the top talent, and you're asking everyone to enroll in that quest to do those things, right? But not only that, but it's arming your stakeholders with the answers to the test. Like, here's how you go do it. Let me support you, versus having a reactive stance to it and just hoping that you're going to attract the best talent. So I love that, and it's a great best practice. You also talked a lot about technology and AI, and ironically, I posted on LinkedIn yesterday. I popped into LinkedIn, and I think all the news feeds that you see, I think 8 out of 10 were all about AI. And there's just tends to be a lot of noise around this topic, but it's also critical to leverage it and use it to do the things that you just mentioned in a few minutes ago to get us closer to the human element of the role. But if you're not careful, it can actually do the opposite if you're not selecting the right AI or the right technology. So, with that being top of mind, how are you approaching AI and technology and talent acquisition, and where are you seeing the most real impact so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. And something in there that's really important as well is not just selecting it, but it's how you deploy it and embed it within your day-to-day in a thoughtful way. And I think while there's all this hype out there, the reality is everybody's still trying to figure out the right way to fit it into your workflow. And I feel like right now we're seeing some extremes, right? And we're seeing maybe some over reliance on it to where we're losing the human element. And you're seeing things that are now being described as AI slop, right? Mm-hmm. It's clearly coming from an AI engine, doesn't feel real. And that's actually going to have, obviously, that creates more work downstream, and it can actually impact your brand if you're not doing it correctly, right? The other piece that we see on the other end that's happening externally is I also see companies jumping in what I would say arguably too fast on AI, and then you're seeing reductions of workforce, and we're going to replace this with AI. And the piece there, and this goes for any technology, if you've ever implemented a new technology, it's not day one plug and play. There is a level of hypercare that needs to be in place. Many times it requires a lot of human oversight to make sure that the systems start to work the way that you intend for them, that bugs are fixed, and that really you're not, the end product that you're trying to get to is not impacted. And if for anything, at a certain point, it's actually being improved upon, which is the whole goal, right? Efficiency gains, improved outputs, and more value-added time back to the team. So how we're approaching it has been, again, I'm gonna say the word intentional a lot, because it is very easy, number one, to get lost in the sauce and say, well, there's all kinds of technologies out there. There's so much opportunity, right? And there is. And talent acquisition, in terms of the HR space, I mean, it is the most functionally rich area to see AI technology, because there's a lot that we do that can be not necessarily automated, but can be optimized through machine learning and artificial intelligence. So how we're approaching it, first and foremost, is to really understand the landscape. So what technologies are battle tested and proven, that have had some years in the space, that have, where the hype has now been turned into proven capability, right? Reliable technology versus, what technologies really have a lot of promise, but they're just brand new and you just don't know if it's fully operational yet, right? You also have to be very honest with yourself of where is our company today? What systems and technologies do we have in place? Do we have the processes and operating model to properly bring on certain technologies in a meaningful way where we'll see the impact? And being really clear on what problems you want to solve, because different technologies are going to solve different problems. Some technologies that exist have multiple modalities, and you can purchase all 5 modules, you can purchase one, but starting where you see the biggest opportunity and where you can define or at least have a general understanding of what the desired outcomes and return on investment will be. Yep. So we have been approaching AI in that kind of manner, starting with what's a bona fide tool today, and based on those bona fide tools, how does that solve a couple biggest challenges that we're trying to attack, that free up our TA partners for value-added work, that improve the experience for candidates, and then make the process easier and faster for managers while not minimizing or diminishing quality of hire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I think people need to listen to and be grounded in is starting with what problem are you trying to solve? And I think, like myself and many others, when we are trying to conform to this race around AI or technology, oftentimes we miss that as our North Star. And then next thing you know, it's like you have a failed implementation, no adoption, and then what resources are really required to do it effectively. That's certainly learning lessons that I've gone through, and I think it's really, really important for folks to understand. And then the last piece is the investment thesis. Is I think early on was, how can we save money by investing in technology or AI? And the reality is, it's not that. It's optimization and doing more and being able to scale and grow is where I've seen it work most. And so I think you nailed it with a lot of those discussions. And it sounds to me that you are continuously being grounded in the vision of what you're trying to accomplish anyway around a candidate experience and getting your folks closer to the human element of the role. And I think if you continue to do that, you'll have a clear understanding of what to say yes to and what to say no to. So spot on. I think it was really, really good. Speaking of which, in terms of the way the landscape has shifted, what does a shift from transactional recruiting to a more strategic talent advisory really look like in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to me, I think especially when we talk about AI and how that's brought on, and just knowing what's going on in the environment around us, and it's tied to the last question too, right? It's also imperative on TA leaders and HR leaders to articulate not only the ROI on these technology investments, but it's also talking about what are we not doing today that we will do with this time back, right? And helping map out what that kind of life cycle of returns and efficiency gains and et cetera you'll get from taking on an investment like this. And what that means for TA is we've got to get smarter in how we operate, and we've got to be more strategic. And it goes back to a few things I've said, right? When you're challenged with a highly competitive market where people are, not as willing to move, when you're dealing with attention span constraints, and you're trying to drive the right activities and change and getting the right people in the door, you've got to have the slack time and the preparation to show up in a different way. And that means spending more time with leaders to understand the business. What is keeping them up at night? What are their talent challenges today? Asking questions and just demonstrating that intellectual curiosity that's going to help you know more than just about that job and how it looked today, right? I mean, that requires from the beginning of a search for TA to approach that conversation differently. No longer can we be going in and just saying, what are the top 5 skills that you need or qualifications that you have? And okay, I'm going to go find that. That doesn't work, right? We've got to really understand what the work that needs to be done is. What are the expectations for success? What are the things that we need to do tomorrow that we're not able to do today, so that you can craft that ideal archetype and selection criteria with the manager, so that you can articulate a compelling story to candidates that attracts them to the position. And so that you can also guide a more effective process, and you're doing it in a way that is thoughtful about what's going to be impactful for the business. That's number 1, deeper business understanding. 2 is data-driven advisory, advice and guidance to managers. So we all have had a ton of experience in our space, and we know from the gut, this is what doesn't work. When we've searched for this role in the past, this is what has worked. We want smaller interview panels. We want quicker turnaround. But when we're doing that without any sort of data, it's hard to redirect on process. It's hard to challenge an initial selection profile and say, these are actually more relevant skills and experiences for the role that you have, if you don't have the data to back it up. But when you come in and say, okay, manager, the last couple times we've filled this role, our average time to fill this position has been over 90 days. If we do these 3 things, I am confident that we will shave off at least 2 to 3 weeks of this search. And then you lay those out very clearly, you're now having a different conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's now real to them. They're not worried about, as much of the process pieces as how do I get the best talent on board faster?
Yeah. And then you tied the business impact, which you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Exactly. So coming in and being advisory and using the data that you have to help guide them, right? I mean, it's same with compensation versus target profiles versus compensation grade. We've all had managers that want something that is more than what they actually have today. So it's one thing to say that's not the role we have. It's a whole different conversation when you say, this is what we've actually ended up hiring for the past few times that we've hired at this level across these teams. And this is what that would look like in terms of profile and experience levels, and what you're going to need to be prepared for in terms of training. And then that really leads us to the 3rd piece, which is really proactive and clear guidance on the best practices around the talent attraction and selection process. Again, our managers they're not hiring every day. This is not their primary role. So we need to be really clear with who's on first, what is it that I need from you, and what is really going to make us do this better, right? So everything from having a more thoughtful kickoff meeting to helping them determine competencies and focus areas for their interview team and making sure they're communicating those so that when people are interviewing, we're focused, to having a structured debrief meeting where we're coming back to the capabilities needed for the role. We're making sure that everybody's being heard, and we're making, decisions that are consultative, but also, aligned to best practice.
Yeah. Really, really good stuff. I want to hit on a few things because, if you're a TA leader or an executive building out a team or taking over a team, those are fundamental different skills than what we've grew up to know in TA and or recruiting, where it was, what I call get a rec, fill a rec. And you're going beyond the job description and the pay rates, right? It's now, to your point, you said business impact. and then helping them understand and tell the story around those things. Um, how do you transform a TA team to start operating in that way? Do you have to go out and procure that talent now, or do you think that you can level up folks to do those things, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of both. First and foremost, I think anytime that you are looking to level up or even change the approach for how things are done, it starts with understanding where you are today and creating a clear strategy that resonates with the people that you're trying to influence. And then you have to really influence the change. People have to get excited about it. They have to understand, like, how and why is this going to help me? How and why is this going to help me be better at what I'm doing? How will this help me have more success? So it starts with having a clear vision and clear set of strategies that people understand. Then it is identifying where the gaps are and figuring out how within your organization or within whatever those gaps are, you're going to solve for those. So for us, when we shifted to more of this strategic operating model, what we were transitioning from was really a sense where our goal was to be the best headhunters out there, right? Save as much on external hiring fees as possible, which is a great function and output of an internal recruiting team. I mean, right? We should save the company money there. But what we were missing was there was no real focus on the consultation, the experience, how are we driving value in that process? So what we did was we first mapped out what does success look like? So what are the key skills that you need, the key behaviors you should be demonstrating? What are the experiences that someone should have as they progress in certain roles? So really like career framework and tied next to our ways of working as a team. What was the baseline? What were the expectations? Then it was a combination of through building the skills and setting the foundation. We started to tackle the skill building through specific, like 1 to 2 hour long sessions where we were focused on one topic, and we would have, breakout sessions around here's what the situation is, get into small teams. And this was like global, right? So you're hearing how different people would approach the problem. So you're learning different ways of operating. You're seeing that people in different countries, different regions actually have the same problems I do. And actually that's something interesting that I've learned of how to fix it. First, it was like skill building within the team to start to build the muscle, process improvement, thinking about how to do things differently. Then we actually pulled in outside training, a firm that was specific to strategic recruitment that really it was like an 18-hour, multi-week, hands-on training. It was a workshop to really focus on kind of building up those capabilities. And after that, we created a playbook for our team. So anytime somebody new came on board, they knew exactly what to do from soup to nuts. And it was laid out, best practice, here's what you do in the system, so that there is a foundation for what good looks like, no matter where you are in the organization. And then it's about governance and accountability, right? So we have, our own goals as a team that are based around, keeping the momentum. There is governance around making sure that some of the things that we've said we're going to do, we continue to do. And then driving the accountability makes it to where, people understand that we're all on this journey together. There's no treatment if you're not doing that, following things properly. So you feel like you're on board for the right things. You feel like everybody's held to the same standard, and that's what creates a high performing team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the most powerful thing that you started with is just casting a clear vision of what you want to accomplish, getting people enrolled in that, and then seeing it all the way through until the accountability piece. So you nailed on every single spot there, which is phenomenal. You talked a little bit about process as you were having that discussion. So for the TA leaders that might be listening and organizations that are really looking to improve their hiring function, where should they start? Should they start in process? Should they start in technology or people? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think to me, from my perspective, I think it always starts with, um, it always starts with like, what's your North Star? What do you want your function to be known for? But then you need to do an analysis of like, where are the gaps? But I think it starts with process, right? Because until you know what process what you want the process to look like, and then it's hard to back into the right technologies and identify if you have the right capabilities and people to execute that process. So first start with the process that we have today, the process that we want. And if it's not the process that we want, what is it? What are the gaps? What are the bottlenecks? What is it that we want to be different? And that's going to help you. That's going to help you map to, is there a technology solution? Is there a capability gap? And once you have that clarity and you've defined the capabilities needed, it's a lot easier. And you've identified the capabilities and you've addressed them, right? I mean, expectations may change. Capabilities that you're asking for today may have not been asked for tomorrow. So first, you want to make sure that that's clear with your team. You want to make sure that you're doing what you can to set them up for success. And if for some reason those capabilities are still not being built, then you start to think about, okay, do I have the right talent in place? And as part of that too, to make sure that the structure of your team is supporting what you're trying to achieve, right? And there's different TA models have different ways of operating. Some have sourcers and advisors, some have, the TA partner does everything, including interview scheduling. So you've really got to think about what's the work that needs to be done? What's the best way to do this? And based on what model I have, that's also going to impact what capabilities you need, what tools you need, all of that.
Right. So process, technology, and people in that order, you would say. Yeah, good. You started off that answer with, being clear on who it is that you want to be. And when you think about it from an employer perspective and employer branding, we hear and see it all the time. It's becoming such a major differentiator, employee value proposition, all those different things. So how can companies build visibility and attract talent if they're not, a household name?
I mean, yeah, this hits home because we take all sorts of agricultural products and create plant-based ingredients that go into food, beverages, pharmaceuticals, beauty products, things that are in your home and you have no idea who we are, right? So this hits home for us. What it meant is that, and how we needed to differentiate ourselves was one, we needed to understand who does know us, and how do we first and foremost make sure that we are more visible within those channels and within that community. So what are the major trade shows and events that our company goes to that we should make more of a presence at from a branding standpoint, that it's not just a sales conference, but it's also an employer branding or recruitment marketing opportunity. What channels are our target candidates on? Are they LinkedIn? If you're a software company, maybe you're going to like a Dice. But where are the candidates you're trying to get to? Where are the universities that you're going to from an early talent standpoint? Are those universities, do they have programs that directly tie to what your business does? Are they in locations that are in proximity to your location so that you can create more of a deeper connection than just showing up at a career fair once a year? And really having a multimodality strategy that meets people where they are. So whether it is employer branding across social media platforms for professional level positions, or it is the local engagement for manufacturing roles at the hourly level, you've got to understand who the audience is that you're trying to get to, and you've got to create content and communication that makes them excited about what you're doing, or at least gets them thinking about you.
Yeah.
And what we've done when we go to events like that is we've created materials based on our employer value proposition that we refreshed in 2025 that really speak to what people are going to be interested in, because we ultimately want to show you that we are an employer of choice. You may not know of us, may not have known of us until today, but here is what we're all about. Here is the accolades we've won from a sustainability standpoint, an ethics standpoint, a pay transparency standpoint. We're actually multi-time winners of best places to work, and here's why. So, it's the hard part is just reaching people. So once you figure out where are those folks and how can we get in front of them, that really starts to unlock the network, and then it's about telling your story.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you mentioned that is probably often overlooked is starting out with who is the audience and community that already should know you. So, not even the people that may not have heard of you before, but who should have heard of you by now. And then starting there to saturate and gain exposure in that pool first before you start expanding out. I think that's a really, really nice piece of advice that I think often, and we overlook it too from our ideal customer profile around our customer base and who we're trying to attract is, it's like a lot of time your existing customer base is your fastest way to grow. So that's really good advice that I think is industry agnostic. So well said. Okay. So if you could give one piece of advice to HR leaders trying to modernize their hiring strategy in 2026 or even beyond, what would it be?
A great question. One piece of advice to modernize their strategy. I think it goes back to define who it is that you want to be and be very honest with yourself of where you are today, because that North Star will guide everything else that you need to be. But it starts by being an honest assessment of where are we today? What's not working that we really want to work? And then backing that into how we're going to pull in the talent that we want.
Yeah. So starting off with what is your actual operating reality today, first and foremost, and getting really sober into that idea before you start thinking about what's next. So that's really, really good. Aaron, this is exactly the kind of conversations I think our listeners needed. Some of the biggest things that I took away from is just your intentionality and what you're trying to accomplish. Clearly, you're making a big impact there, and your teams are making big impacts there. So thank you for sharing the way you think about this work. And this episode resonated with you, please subscribe and pass it along to someone building and hiring function right now. And until then, we'll see you on the next Workforce Navigator. Aaron, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rodrigo. It was a pleasure.